The power people in Hollywood, I don't know, it's just amazing to me. I think what it is that they fear black males making too much money or becoming too strong and too powerful.
June 29th, 2013. Jim Kelly, America's first black martial arts icon, passed away in San Diego at the age of 67. The news of his death cut through Hollywood like a blade. A legend was gone. An era had ended. But before the sorrow could fade, a chilling question echoed. What did Jim Kelly really leave behind after more than 40 years breaking Hollywood's barriers? Money, or just memories? His films had once earned Warner Brothers hundreds of millions of dollars. Yet when Jim Kelly died, his family struggled to cover the final hospital bills and legal paperwork. A man who had paved the way for an entire generation of black actors on the big screen died with a fortune smaller than that of a B-list TV star. It was one of Hollywood's cruelest ironies. Jim Kelly left the world a legacy and left his family a tragedy soaked in tears. Before becoming the first black man to unleash a flying kick on the silver screen, Jim Kelly was just a poor kid from Paris, Kentucky. His full name was James Milton Kelly, born May 5, 1946, in an era when the word equality was still a luxury promise. His father, James M. Kelly Sr., ran a locker rental service for U.S. Navy servicemen. His mother, Thelma Kelly, helped manage the business while working as a server at the same facility. In the 1950s, Kentucky still bore the scars of segregation. Black people couldn't sit in the same rows, enter certain stores, or even be addressed as Mr. And in that suffocating world, young Jim Kelly, fast, strong, tough, and smart, chose to fight back in his own way through sports. At Bourbon County High School, Kelly was one of the most dynamic students: basketball, track, football, you name it. His coach once said, Kelly ran like he was trying to outrun the prejudice of America itself. That talent earned Jim Kelly a full football scholarship to the University of Louisville, an extraordinary achievement for a young black man in the American South at the time. But prejudice didn't stop at the campus gates. During a 1965 practice, the head coach hurled a racist insult at another black player. Jim stood up, threw his helmet to the ground, and said something that stunned the whole team. "If that's how you lead, then I don't need to play for you." He walked out, never looked back, never apologized, never compromised. That decision cost him everything: his scholarship, his future, and the easiest path out of poverty. But Jim Kelly chose to lose it all, just to keep his pride. After leaving college, Kelly had nothing. He drifted from Lexington to Los Angeles, taking any job he could find, from nightclub bouncer to flyer distributor. Until one day, he stepped into a small dojo. The sharp cry of Ki echoed through the room. No one cared who he was, what color he was, or where he came from. Here, everyone was equal before the punch. The poor boy who conquered the martial arts world. Where no one asked about skin color. Kelly began training under Sin Quang Thay, a Chinese-Indonesian master and founder of the Shaolin Do system. Later, he continued studying Shorin Ryu Okinawan Karate under Parker Shelton, Nate Patton, and Gordon Dover Sola, legendary names in America's martial arts scene during the 1960s. Kelly's training intensity shocked everyone. He practiced 8 hours a day, breaking each session into focused technique sets. When his legs swelled, he wrapped them and kept going. When his thigh muscles tore, he kept training his spins. When someone asked him why, Kelly simply said, "Pain heals." But if you quit, that wound stays with you forever. Within 5 years, the Drifter had become a champion. In 1971, at the Long Beach International Karate Championships, the biggest tournament in the U.S., he defeated multiple opponents to win the World Middleweight Championship. The crowd rose to their feet, applauding. A black martial artist had just done the unthinkable, beating Asian fighters on an international karate stage. That victory opened another door. Kelly moved to Los Angeles and opened his own dojo on Crenshaw Boulevard, home to one of California's most vibrant black communities. It wasn't just a dojo. It was a sanctuary for rejected dreams. Young men once stopped by police. Young women once mocked by society came to learn how to stand tall. Kelly was both a teacher and an example. In Crenshaw, they called him Sensei Jim. But it was this very dojo that would define the biggest turning point in Jim Kelly's life. the black man who challenged Hollywood. The kick that changed everything. One day in early 1972, producer Fred Weintraub, fresh off Warner Bros.' Kung Fu series, heard rumors of a black martial artist on Crenshaw who moved like lightning. He drove out to see for himself. When Kelly spun and kicked, Weintraub froze. The light caught his frame, sweat burst into the air, and his eyes glinted like blades. My God, he looks like he just stepped out of a comic book. A week later, Jim Kelly received a round-trip ticket from Los Angeles to Hong Kong. On it were the words Warner Brothers Enter the Dragon. When Kelly arrived on the Hong Kong set of Enter the Dragon, he realized he was the only black man in the cast. But he wasn't afraid. Bruce Lee, the Chinese superstar taking the world by storm, was immediately drawn to Kelly's energy. They trained together, traded techniques. Bruce called him Brother Jim. A crew member later recalled, "Whenever Bruce trained, everyone stopped to watch. But when Kelly started warming up, even Bruce stopped." Kelly's role, Williams, an American martial artist falsely accused and killed, was originally minor. But after the first few scenes, director Robert Klaus expanded it, giving him more action sequences. On screen, Kelly radiated pride and cool defiance, blending black power attitude with Eastern martial discipline. He moved as if every step declared, "I fear no one, and I will not kneel." Enter the Dragon. The moment that shattered all barriers. In August 1973, Enter the Dragon premiered. The world exploded. The film grossed over $90 million, equivalent to more than $400 million today, bringing Asian martial arts to the global stage. The poster featured three faces: Bruce Lee, John Saxon, and Jim Kelly. To white audiences, Kelly was the coolest black fighter in America. To black audiences, he was the first man in cinema history to punch back at the system. Theaters in Los Angeles, New York, Detroit, and Chicago were packed. In Harlem, crowds shouted, "That's our man," every time Kelly appeared. At black colleges, students wore t-shirts reading "Jim Kelly kicks ass." The media called him the Black Samurai and the coolest man in Hollywood. Jet magazine put him on the cover with the headline, "The New Face of Black Power on Screen." After that success, Warner Brothers wasted no time. They signed Kelly for a 3-picture deal, making him the first black martial arts star in the studio's history. The first film, Black Belt Jones 1974, fused kung fu with the funky, high-energy blaxploitation-style leather jackets, fast cars, and funk soundtracks. Kelly not only starred, but choreographed all the fight scenes, bringing American karate style to the big screen. His next film, Three the Hard Way, turned him into a cultural icon. And while Hot Potato 1976 wasn't a blockbuster, it cemented his image as the black hero of 1970s cinema. From a Kentucky boy expelled from the football field for standing up to racism, Jim Kelly had climbed to Hollywood's highest platform shoulder to shoulder with Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris. Jim Kelly never gave speeches about race. He didn't need to. His presence was enough. His kicks spoke for millions. Black men can be symbols, not just victims. The lights, the money, the fame. Jim Kelly thought he had finally reached the American dream. But he didn't know it was also the beginning of a nightmare called Hollywood. Fame came fast. The fall came even faster. Fame, fortune, and the first fall of the Jim Kelly empire. While Warner Brothers was counting profits, Kelly was counting bills. Enter the Dragon grossed over $90 million, about $400 million in today's money. It was a global sensation. But according to those close to him, Kelly's share was barely enough to buy a small house in Sherman Oaks and a used sports car. His contract was a scale contract, the standard pay rate for B-list actors between $1,000 and $2,500 a week. No box office percentage, no residual rights, no international royalties. Hollywood called it a fair contract. Kelly knew better, it was only fair if you were white. 3 weeks before the film's release, Bruce Lee died suddenly at age 32. The world mourned, and Warner Brothers realized something: the film now had only one living hero, Jim Kelly. He became Enter the Dragon's last man standing, but he wasn't treated like a partner. To the studio, he was just the guy riding Bruce Lee's legacy. When reporters asked about money, Kelly simply smiled. In a 1974 interview with Ebony magazine, he said bluntly, "They got rich off that movie. All I got were bigger tax bills." A short sentence, but it exposed all of Hollywood. A black man helped a studio make hundreds of millions and still couldn't afford a decent home in Beverly Hills. Yet the spotlight hadn't dimmed. Warner Brothers quickly signed Kelly for 3 more films: Black Belt Jones, 1974, Three the Hard Way, 1974, and Hot Potato, 1976, all performed moderately well, establishing Kelly as America's first black martial arts icon. He was the perfect blend of Shaft's cool and Bruce Lee's fighting spirit. But that was when the first cracks in the Jim Kelly empire began to show. The scripts Warner Brothers sent were nearly identical silent black characters who fought well but died early. When Kelly asked to rewrite dialogue to give the characters soul and voice, the producer told him coldly, "Audiences don't want to hear you talk. They just want to see you fight." Kelly looked him straight in the eye and replied, "I don't act to be a statue. I act to tell our story." The truth was, Hollywood never wanted black people to define the narrative. They only wanted them to look good, move well, and stay quiet. From that moment, the label difficult to work with was pinned to him. And in an industry where white men made all the decisions, that label was a death sentence. Worse was yet to come. By 1975, the blaxploitation wave films made for and by black audiences began to collapse. Government and social groups accused the genre of promoting violence and distorting the image of black Americans. Theaters catering to black audiences shut down en masse, and film budgets were slashed. When Hot Potato hit theaters in 1976, no one cared anymore. The film flopped, and Warner Bros. Didn't even bother making a statement. No farewell party, no thank you, no call back. From the height of cultural fame, Kelly fell into silence. Hollywood had new faces: Sylvester Stallone, Chuck Norris, Jean-Claude Van Damme, heroes who fit white America's taste. Fred Williamson started his own production company. Jim Brown went into politics. And Jim Kelly, the man who once fought beside Bruce Lee and made the world hold its breath, stopped getting calls. The projects he wrote himself were flatly rejected. Producers claimed black martial arts movies don't sell. Some friends advised him to take side roles or villains. He refused. "If I have to die, I'll die as a hero," he said. In 1978, when asked why he left Hollywood, Kelly smiled his eyes, showing both fatigue and pride. "I didn't leave Hollywood. Hollywood left me." He didn't lose because of lack of talent. He lost because the game was never built for him. A man who could drop an opponent with a single kick couldn't break through the invisible clauses in a Warner Brothers contract. And that was the first collapse, the fall of the Jim Kelly empire. An empire that never got rich, stripped of its power before it could even rise. A hero forgotten in the world he helped create. Jim Kelly quietly withdrew from Hollywood. But he didn't retreat. He simply changed battlegrounds. Hollywood shut its doors, but Kelly found freedom in an unexpected place: the tennis court. The silent years tennis and a life in solitude. In March 1977, he left Los Angeles, driving his faded sports car south to San Diego. No farewell letters, no goodbye party. He left everything behind: movie contracts, torn posters, and a city that once worshipped him but strangled him with fine print. In San Diego, he rented a small beachfront house, quiet enough to hear the waves, far enough not to see Warner Brothers billboards. For months, Jim Kelly disappeared from the headlines. Then one day, people saw him again in sportswear on a tennis court. At first, he played just for fun. But once he picked up a racket, his eyes lit up, like they did on the dojo floor. Kelly joined the USTA Senior Men's Circuit, a tennis league for older athletes requiring endurance, precision, and discipline. In multiple California state and local tournaments, Kelly's name appeared among the top 10 men's singles, a remarkable feat for someone with no professional tennis background. He also ranked top 2 in men's doubles in California, often partnering with seasoned local players, proof of his coordination and skill even in middle age. One of Kelly's biggest decisions was to turn tennis into a long-term business. He founded and later owned the Coronado Bay Tennis Club near San Diego's coast. It wasn't a small setup. It had multiple courts, a pool, locker rooms, and a lounge. Kelly used his martial arts knowledge to teach agility, strength, and competitive spirit, blending karate discipline with tennis training. Coronado Bay became a steady source of income after his film career ended. Students paid lesson fees, families purchased memberships and local tournaments, and peak hour rentals kept cash flowing. In his later years, the club's income was estimated at around $60,000 to $100,000 per year, a solid figure for a local sports business. Enough to support his family and maintain a comfortable life in San Diego. Crenshaw had once been his dojo of combat, Hollywood, his battlefield of lights and cameras. But Coronado, the seaside tennis court, became his sanctuary, a place of wind rackets, sunlight, and peace. Yet Kelly's silence stirred curiosity. Cheap tabloids began spreading rumors. Gambling addiction, tax debt, failed investments. No proof, no sources, just whispers. In one rare 1985 interview, when asked about the rumors, Kelly replied calmly, "I didn't lose money. I just stopped chasing it." A cold, yet painfully honest line. Because for Jim Kelly, money had never been freedom. Love and shadows. Jim Kelly once said something that people never forgot. "I don't believe in fame. I believe in the people who stay when fame disappears." And throughout his life, there were only two women who truly stayed in two completely different ways. One during the fire of fame, and one in the quiet years of peace. In 1973, at the height of Enter the Dragon's worldwide success, Jim Kelly began dating Rosalind Miles, the beautiful actress from the blaxploitation era, known for Shaft's Big Score, 1972, and Black Girl, 1972. The media called her the Queen of Black Cinema, and when she stood beside Kelly, the Black Samurai, they became the golden couple of Black Hollywood in the 1970s. They appeared together at film premieres, Warner Brothers parties, and on the cover of Jet magazine. But Hollywood lights are never soft enough to protect love. The two slowly drifted apart, no scandal, no fight, just two paths going in different directions. Rosalind later said, in a 1984 interview, "Jim was the only man I ever met who could walk away from Hollywood without looking back. He didn't regret it. He just wanted to live truthfully." When Hollywood had long forgotten his name, Jim Kelly reconnected with Marilyn Dishman, an old friend from his Kentucky days. The same girl who used to cheer for him during his high school track meets at Bourbon County. When he left the movie sets behind, Marilyn was the only one who didn't ask why. She simply said, "You're tired, aren't you? Then let's go home." They married quietly, with no press, no fanfare, no lavish wedding. In the mornings, Kelly taught tennis, and in the afternoons, Marilyn worked as an accountant for a local company. They lived together for 30 years and never had children. Instead, they raised 3 cats, Bruce, Sam, and Sugar, little reminders of the memories Kelly never spoke aloud. From then on, he was never far from Marilyn. She became his friend, his lover, his companion, and his final protector. The only person who saw the fragility behind the fierce eyes of a legend. But behind that peaceful life lay a bitter truth, one that even Hollywood dared not speak. Jim Kelly was never rich. Wealth, the fortune that made his family cry. In 2009, as the internet filled with net worth lists of 1970s stars, Jim Kelly's name suddenly resurfaced. Countless sites claimed Jim Kelly net worth 25 million USD. It sounded believable. A legend who once shook Hollywood beside Bruce Lee signed with Warner Brothers and became the first black action icon in film history. But the truth was very different. Friends in the martial arts community said Jim never cared about money. He only cared about freedom. The house in San Diego was his biggest asset, but it wasn't luxurious. After leaving Hollywood, Jim Kelly and his wife Marilyn bought a small home in San Diego, California. Not a mansion, not an oceanfront villa, just a single-story white house with a wooden fence and a small front yard. A quiet home tucked near Coronado Bay, where he could teach tennis garden and live the peaceful life Hollywood never allowed him. According to California property records, between 2000 and 2010, houses of that type were valued between $700,000 and $1,000. That was his largest tangible asset, a modest home he called the Final Arena. As a member of SAG-AFTRA Screen Actors Guild, American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, Kelly had a small pension and health fund from his film career. But because his time in Hollywood was short, the total was modest, around $100,000 to $200,000, including residuals trickling in from Enter the Dragon and a few Warner Brothers titles. A former residual payment employee once revealed B-list actors from the 1970s usually received $100 to $500 a year, and after 30 years, it was even less. In other words, Hollywood still sent Jim Kelly checks, just not enough to cover monthly health insurance. Fortunately, he had steady income from his Coronado Bay Tennis Club, earning between $60,000 and $100,000 per year. In truth, Jim Kelly's total net worth was only about $1.5 to $2.5 million, enough for a comfortable life, but nowhere near the $20 million myth circulating online. A star who once helped Warner Brothers earn over $90 million had ended up with less than 3% of the value he created. The expenses that slowly ate away his fortune. By the 2000s, as Jim Kelly's hair turned gray and back pain forced him to rest between lessons, his expenses began to climb quietly. California property taxes showed no mercy. Tennis court maintenance fees rose. Electricity, water, and health insurance bills piled up. The latter something he paid for faithfully, but rarely used. Jim never complained. He just quietly signed the checks, one acquaintance from the tennis community recalled. But I knew there were times he had to dip into his savings, just to pay the land lease. The words sounded calm, but they were a quiet confession from a man who once stood at the top of the world. There was a time when Warner Brothers spent millions promoting his name worldwide. Now he was counting bills one by one just to keep the small court where he taught children to play tennis. According to California's taxes and cost of living at the time, between 30 and 40% of Kelly's annual income was consumed by property taxes, insurance, court maintenance, and growing medical expenses. It was a brutal reality for a man once called a million-dollar star who had never actually seen $1 million in his account. Friends said that in his final years, he lived with extreme simplicity. He ate vegetables, drank black coffee, drove a car from the 1990s, and spent almost everything on keeping his tennis club running. The empire Hollywood thought he owned was in truth just a damp court after the rain, and the man who once stunned the world with a single kick was now simply fighting to stay balanced against the weight of his bills. The final year's illness costs, and a silent battle. In 2011, on a quiet morning in San Diego, Jim Kelly felt something was wrong. He had just finished teaching his morning tennis class, walked into the locker room, and suddenly his chest tightened. The medical results left him frozen Hodgkin's lymphoma. The doctors told him the disease could still be managed with chemotherapy and radiation if treated aggressively. But Kelly said nothing. He wasn't afraid of dying. He was afraid of becoming that frail celebrity Hollywood would pity. So he chose to face it in silence. Friends recalled that even as his body weakened, Jim still drove to the Coronado Bay Tennis Club every morning. Behind his calm smile were sleepless nights, the pain of chemotherapy, and handfuls of his thick, once iconic afro hair falling away. The cost and the fear of a former legend cancer treatment was not only a physical battle, it was a financial one. Since he no longer had an active SAG-AFTRA contract, Kelly's insurance only covered a small fraction of the costs. Chemotherapy, radiation, specialized medications, and annual checkups cost between $150,000 and $200,000 each year, not including rehabilitation and ongoing tests. He sold part of his lease rights to the Coronado Bay Tennis Club borrowed against his life insurance and withdrew nearly all his savings. Friends offered to start a fundraiser, but Kelly refused. "I don't want anyone's pity," he said. "I made my living with my kicks, and I'll pay my way with them too." A close friend from the martial arts community said tearfully, "He was poor, but he never let anyone know. Even at the end, he wanted to stay strong in everyone's eyes." The final months, when the light began to fade. By early 2013, Kelly's health had deteriorated severely. His body grew thin, his voice turned hoarse, but his spirit stayed remarkably bright. Every morning, he sat on his porch watching the sunrise holding a copy of The Tao of Jeet Kune Do by Bruce Lee. Marilyn said it was the book he reread most in his life. June 29, 2013, Jim Kelly passed away at his home in San Diego after a 2-year battle with cancer. No tears, no cameras, no headlines. His death was confirmed by Marilyn Dishman, his wife. His caregiver, the only one who stayed. She refused all interviews and told the Los Angeles Times only one thing: he left peacefully, the same way he lived. A funeral without an audience. The funeral was held 3 days later in a small chapel in San Diego. No reporters, no TV coverage, only a few old friends from the martial arts and tennis communities. Fred Williamson sent a white wreath with a brief message, Brother Jim, the coolest man we ever knew. That same weekend, downtown San Diego was hosting Comic-Con International 2013. When the news spread that Jim Kelly, the Enter the Dragon legend, had passed away, hundreds of fans did something no one expected. They raised their old 1973 Enter the Dragon posters, showing Bruce Lee, John Saxon, and Jim Kelly in the corner, his proud afro and cold, fearless eyes staring back through time. One fan held up a sign that read, "Williams never dies. He just walks out of the tournament." Across social media, thousands of tributes poured in. "You were the first man who made me believe a black man could be a hero. No one ever had Jim Kelly's style. No one ever walked like that again." Younger black stars, Michael Jai White, Wesley Snipes, and Eddie Murphy, all paid tribute. Michael Jai White wrote, "Without Jim Kelly, there would be no me not in Spawn, not in Black Dynamite. A late farewell." In August 2013, during the Enter the Dragon 40th anniversary screening in Los Angeles, Warner Brothers dedicated 60 seconds to honor Jim Kelly. On the screen played the moment where Kelly delivered his first powerful kick, eyes blazing with fire, followed by the words, "Jim Kelly, 1946, 2013, the coolest man in Hollywood." The audience rose in silence. Everyone knew it wasn't just an actor who had died. It was a symbol of freedom, dignity, and black pride, legacy. His name outlived his fame. People often say, "Death ends a life, but it cannot bury a legend." Jim Kelly proved that true. 10 years after his death, his name is still spoken, not because of numbers or scandals, but because he left behind the rarest thing in Hollywood: integrity. In the summer of 2009, the film Black Dynamite premiered. A new generation laughed, but those who had lived through the 1970s fell silent. They saw Jim Kelly in every kick, every grin, every shining afro. Michael Jai White, the film's star, later said, "I wasn't playing Black Dynamite. I was channeling the spirit of Jim Kelly. The confident walk, the fearless gaze, the pride of a black man who knows how strong he really is." That was the first rebirth of Jim Kelly, after decades of Hollywood silence. And when the documentary Enter the Clones of Bruce premiered in 2023, audiences wept. Watching the old footage, Kelly beside Bruce Lee Black and Asian, two men of different colors sharing one truth: freedom has no color. Influence beyond generations. Before Jim Kelly, the martial arts world had only Asian and white heroes. After Jim Kelly, Hollywood finally learned that black men can fight and fight better than anyone expected. Wesley Snipes said in an interview, "If there was no Jim Kelly, there would be no Blade. I just carried on what he started." Michael Jai White added, "He made me believe I could be a hero without asking anyone's permission." Even Quentin Tarantino, a devoted fan of 1970s cinema, admitted, "When I created characters for Kill Bill, I wanted a touch of Jim Kelly. That kind of cool where you don't have to say a word to make the whole room go quiet." His image continues to live on in hip-hop music videos, on RZA's Wu-Tang Clan album covers in Detroit graffiti, and even in retro video games. The afro, the GI, the calm yet defiant stare, all symbols of black power and the warrior spirit that needs no slogan. More than an actor, Jim Kelly never won an Oscar. He never got a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. But he had something every award longs to represent: respect. In a world where fame shifts every hour, Kelly chose the opposite path. He stepped out of the spotlight to keep his soul. And that is what made him immortal. Jim Kelly didn't just break the color barrier, he broke the line between celebrity and human being.
All data, analysis, and commentary in this video are presented based on information available at the time of production. The content is subject to change over time and should not be considered a definitive forecast.
There is still so much more to explore: stories of resilience, legacy, and truth. Feel free to dive into some of our top recommended videos now appearing on the screen.